So object-oriented programming revolves around the concept of objects. So these objects contain data, which represents what an object can do, what that object is, and what that object can do. So usually, object-oriented programming is used on systems nga na kay mga entities that contain data. And then that entities can parang perform independently among each other, or they can also interact with other entities. So basic nga kuan lang data about objects are what we call as attributes and methods. Uh, okay. So in object-oriented programming, we have attributes, we also have methods. Okay? So kaning attributes, usually mo na itong ginatawag as variables. And then ang methods, usually mo na itong ginatawag as functions. So an attribute represents the object's state, and the method represents what an object can do. So for example, we have this photo of sa ubos. Let's just assume this represents a person or this represents a human. So unsa may attributes sa human? So we have the name, we have the age, we have the eye color, and then we have the nationality. What are the methods of that human, or what can that human do? So that human can walk, that human can sleep, that human can eat, and that human can sleep. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Another example. Okay, so gis grab rin ako from Call of Duty. So let's just say that you are programming for a game development company. Then you are tasked to create classes or objects classes which represent a character or a player. So you can so these are just some examples of attributes for a character sa isa ka game. So of course, we have the health, we have the armor, and then we have the XP or the experience, 'di ba? So that those are just some attributes of your character. Then unsa may mahimo adto nga character. So that character can walk, that character can run, or they can also sprint. They can also cover or magtago sa whatever sa walls or sa mga barricades. And then they can also use a gun, 'di ba? So again, an example of attributes for a game character, health, armor, and experience. And then some of the things that it can do, it can walk, it can run, it can cover, and then use the gun. Another pod examples objects is a gun. So kana siya. So we can actually model that as another object or as another class. So some examples of attributes for a gun. So we can have ammo, we can have accuracy, and then we have the range. And then what can that gun do? So that gun can shoot, or uh, yeah, it can shoot bullets. Ano bali? Okay. Questions so far about attributes and methods? Wala? Okay. Sige. Next, we will discuss overview lang sa concepts sa object-oriented programming. We actually have four main concepts. We call them encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, and polymorphism. So encapsulation allows us to hide data to prevent other entities from unauthorized access. This is done in two ways, either by bundling of related data or restricting direct access to data. So the reason why we do encapsulation is para lang yun nga to prevent other other lines of codes from accidentally accessing your state or your methods. Because if you expose mga variables or mga methods nga dapat dili unta dapat expose, it can lead to bugs, hard to trace the bugs sa iyong code. Okay. So muna siya akong gibutan diri. Unauthorized access. Hide to prevent unauthorized access. So bundling of data happens during method scoping. So for example, kaning code sa ubos na ako'y duha ka functions. I have foo and then bar. And then both functions have the variable nga cooks. However, we know nga even though they use the same variable name nga cooks, it's actually not the same variable, di ba? It's these are different variables. It's because of scoping. Kaning cooks sa taas, it's just part of foo. Then kaning cooks sa ubos, it's just part of bar. And then we also have another variable, xcz. So kaning xcz kay part lang siya sa scope ni bar. And then foo cannot, again, foo cannot access xcz. Okay, so that's just the first way, kaning bundling of related data. Another way to perform encapsulation is by restricting direct access to data. This is usually done through access modifiers like public, private, and protected. I'm not sure if naka-encounter mo ani sa inyong object-oriented programming, but if you can remember, naman na yung mga keywords nga, diba? Naman na yung keywords nga public, private, and protected. So yeah, that's just another way um, to implement encapsulation in object-oriented languages. So if you say that an attribute or a method is public, then of course it's public. Anyone can access it. Entities outside your class can access it. However, if it is private, then only within that class ang makagamit ana nga attribute or method. So for example, in this code below, our name is public, the birthday is private. Okay, birthday is private. However, getAge is public. GetAge is a method that calculates the age from the birthday. So this tells us that ang name kay publicly accessible ra siya, anyone can access it, as well as ang getAge. Anybody can access the getAge na method. However, kaning birthday, it's not everyone. I mean, any entity outside the user cannot access this variable. So maka-access running a variable is just the methods inside the user na class. Because again, it's private. Question about encapsulation. Wala? Okay. So we proceed with abstraction. So in abstraction, it tells us that not all attributes and methods of an object need to be exposed for users to use. Abstraction tells us to hide the unnecessary keyword, unnecessary details, and only show the important ones in our object. For example, kung mag-drive ka, let's just say mag-drive ka car. So most of the time, you only need to understand how a steering wheel works and how brakes works. How the engine consumes the gasoline and converts it to power is not important, 'di ba? Dili kung mag-drive ka, dili maka maghuna-huna permi kung ginaunsa og convert sa gasolina to power or ginaunsa pag combust sa gasoline. So that's an example of abstraction. Car companies do not like tell you, car companies do not tell you how gasoline is being combusted, di ba? You just present, kung maingkod ka sa imong car, right in front of you, ang imong makita is just the steering wheel and then ang brakes and then anything else nga importante. That's just parang overview lang sa abstraction. So let's just say that you are programming. You are programming a weapon. Okay. So we can have the name of the weapon, the damage and its range as public because we can use it to display important statistics or important details about the weapon. However, let's just say that the user tries to use that weapon. So actually daghan man nga calculations, di ba? Hanggang kahitabo if you use a weapon like for example, i-calculate ana if your game is using a physics engine, then i-calculate sa physics engine ang trajectory sa bullet kay dili man na siya straight lang ang bullet supposedly if we're talking about physics. It parang it follows the trajectory when it launches. So muna siya, we have here the calculate trajectory na to nga method. Another thing, we also have calculate probability of hitting na to nga method. So this method, just calculates the probability nga maigo nimo ang imong target. So actually, kani silang duha nga methods, the user does not need these, di ba? The user do not need to know how you are calculating the trajectory. The user does not need to know how you are calculating the probability. Therefore, you can hide this code or you can hide these methods using the private nga access modifier. Also, the users only need to know how to use a weapon or only need to know about using weapons. So, muna siya, kung ibutang dire, using weapon as public. So again, ang abstraction, it tells us to hide unnecessary. Okay? It tells us to hide unnecessary or not important na mga details from our users. Next, we have inheritance. For inheritance, it's very simple. Morrison hierarchy, basically, it lets an object inherit the attributes and methods of another object. An object can acquire the attributes and methods of another object through inheritance. And the most common example of this would be kanang mga different users sa imong systems. Okay? So for example, you have an administrator, you also have an editor. So an administrator and an editor are both users, diba? And then as users, they have the same attributes and methods like name, log in, and then log out. Okay. So an administrator and an editor can both log in and log out. They also have their names. However, there is something different between the administrator and editor. For example, the administrator can delete a user. An editor can create an article. So instead of murag i-duplicate nimo ang name, login, and logout from the user to each administrator and editor, you can use inheritance so that ma-reuse rin nimo ang user nga class if ever nga nakay new types of users nga buhaton sa imuhang system. So again, administrator and editor are extending users because Administrators and editors have a name, and administrators and editors can both log in and log out. Lastly, we have polymorphism. So for polymorphism, it just allows an object to process data depending on how the data looks like. For example, we can create an add method that behaves differently if the input is an integer or a string or an array. So take a look at the code na kung gisulat sa ubos. Naghimo ko og function nga add. Actually, they are three tulo ka buka add nga functions. However, even though same ra sila og pangalan, valid gyapon nga code. It's because of polymorphism. For example, if ang imong gipass ni add kay duha ka integer, then kani nga function ang mo-execute. If ever nga duha ka string ang imong ipass ni add, then kani nga function ang mo-execute. If duha ka array ang imong i-submit or ang imong i-pass ni add, then kani nga function ang mo-execute. So, yeah, as you can see here, mo na siya itong ginatawag nga allowing an object to process data depending on how the data looks like. Kaya again, how, for example, kaning first na tong add, how does the data look like here? The data looks like duha ka integer. Diri sa ubos, ang data na to, it looks like duha ka string. Sa ubos na tong example, it looks like duha ka integer arrays. So by having different nga signatures, we call it signatures, kanang how it looks like. By having different signatures, the add function will know which of its variants among the three ang iyang i-execute. Okay. Questions? Anyone? About this? So yeah, more to siya for object-oriented programming. Again, we have encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, and polymorphism.